This episode of the Burnout Recovery Podcast is brought to you by MEGA, your medical indemnity partner. Whether you're starting out in your career or have decades of experience, MEGA helps you thrive with support that goes beyond insurance. Enjoy travel benefits like complimentary travel insurance and Qantas points on your membership, plus education, medico-legal support, access to career coaching and wellbeing resources. Visit mega.com.au to learn more. Insurance issued by Medical Insurance Australia, which has not taken into account your objectives or situation. Before you make any decisions about our policies, please read our PDS and consider your needs. Call us for a copy or visit mega.com.au.
Welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast, a guiding resource dedicated to healthcare professionals on their journey to overcoming burnout. Spearheaded by Dr. Jo Braid, a certified professional coach and rehabilitation physician.
Welcome back to the Burnout Recovery Podcast. I'm Dr. Jo Braid, and this is episode number 157. Today, we're exploring something that can really make or break your burnout recovery journey, finding your people and building support systems that actually work. If you've been following this podcast for a while now, you know that burnout thrives in isolation. When we're overwhelmed, we withdraw, thinking we're the only ones struggling. But recovery happens in connection. Today, I want to share two professional support systems that have been game changers in my own journey: Schwartz Rounds and independent coaching. And these aren't just feel-good initiatives. They're evidence-based approaches that create real, meaningful connections and genuine support. Next week, in fact, I will be talking about the Schwartz Rounds at the Australian Doctors Health Conference, and I look forward to seeing you there if you are going to be there. It will be a much expanded version of the short version that I'm sharing on the podcast today. This has been really transformative in my workplace, Bathurst Health Service, the Schwartz Rounds. I put my hand up straight away to be a facilitator in late 2023 when our general manager invited us for expressions of interest. And I've really witnessed firsthand how powerful this model is. Schwartz Rounds are monthly forums that bring together hospital-wide staff from nurses, cleaners, administrators, doctors. Everyone is welcome to share the emotional and social aspects of our work. And they're named after Ken Schwartz, a healthcare lawyer from Boston who experienced both exceptional and disappointing care during his cancer treatment. He picked up that when hospital staff feel supported, they can deliver the care with his quote, small acts of kindness that make the unbearable bearable. And days before he died, he set up the Schwartz Centre for Compassionate Healthcare. And that was in 1995, and here we are in 2005, having them as a regular feature at Bathurst Health Service. And here's what makes them special. A panel of 3 or 4 staff members share personal stories around a theme. Some of the themes we've had include caring for each other in the workplace, and we actually have the coffee shop manager as one of our panelists there. We've also had finding joy in the workplace and what keeps me up at night, amongst different topics that we've talked around. And these aren't clinical case studies. They're deeply personal reflections on what it feels like to do this work. What strikes me is the visible relief on people's faces when they realise they're not alone. So I've seen senior clinicians share how helpless they can feel in a scenario when a patient, when patients make their own decisions as to what treatment they're going to take or not take. And then suddenly everyone in the room has permission to be human. The cleaner talking about comforting a grieving family, and we all realise we carry similar emotional weight regardless of our role. So these forums are not about problem solving or fixing anything. We're not there to give advice or find solutions. We're there to witness each other's experiences, to say, I see you, I hear you, and your feelings matter. And that witnessing, that validation is so incredibly powerful. The ripple effect is remarkable. People check in with each other differently after these sessions. There's more compassion, there's more understanding, and not because we've solved anything, but because we've shared the load of carrying these experiences. And earlier in the year, I presented the results of the surveys that we do on a regular basis with the Schwartz Rounds. And we had some really significant results showing that 79% of survey respondents strongly agreed that the rounds provided new insights. And also 87% of participants agreed that Schwartz Rounds increased their openness with colleagues. The second pillar of my support system is completely independent of my workplace. It's professional coaching. I spend 2 hours every month with my master coach, and it's been absolutely crucial to staying well. I'm out of my burnout recovery phase, but I'm certainly in a burnout prevention phase and maintaining my ongoing resilience. So my coach works specifically with ambitious business owners, helping them step into true leadership. She's not exactly focused on my well-being, but that's a real bonus of having regular coaching, that I really pay attention to managing my own well-being. Her expertise is in leadership development, strategic thinking, and helping people align their actions with their bigger vision. So this independence is key. My coach has no workplace politics to navigate, no organizational agenda to serve. We work on leadership challenges, decision-making frameworks, and how to show up authentically in my role. The improved well-being and resilience, that's the natural byproduct of becoming a more effective and aligned leader. So these 2 hours are sacred time. And yes, coaching costs money, but I've learned how to see it as essential professional development. The return on investment in terms of my career satisfaction and leadership effectiveness has been immeasurable. So what makes coaching different from therapy or mentoring? Coaching is really forward-focused on goals and performance rather than processing past experiences like therapy. And unlike mentoring, which relies on someone's personal experience in your field, coaching brings that sort of trained expertise in human behavior and change. And there's no conflict of interest or reporting relationship like a workplace support system might have. My coach challenges me to think bigger, hold me accountable to my commitments, and helps me see blind spots I can't see myself. The fact that this makes me more resilient and better at managing my stress, well, that's the beautiful side effect of good leadership development. Finding the right coach matters, so look for specific training in coaching, ensure they understand your professional context, and trust your gut on the chemistry. You need to feel safe being vulnerable about your leadership challenges. So here's what I've learned. You need multiple types of support serving different purposes, and think of it like an ecosystem. You need peer support like Schwartz Rounds, that shared experience and understanding and the normalization of challenges. You need professional guidance like coaching, which might be expert knowledge, objective perspective, and structured development. And you might also want mentorship for industry-specific wisdom and community through professional associations or special interest groups. Now, you can't just set up your own Schwartz Rounds. Facilitator training is essential for creating that safe space. But you can create psychologically safe spaces with people you trust on a regular basis. And I have that too with peer coaches. We do second monthly supervision sessions, and these are great. And I would say with a group of coaches who you know, like, and trust, that psychologically safe space can be created really well. You could have peer consultation groups or even informal check-ins with trusted colleagues. And I'd say here the key is regularity plus psychological safety. And those ground rules really matter. This is a confidential space, there's no judgment, and we're really focusing on experience rather than advice giving. And these spaces need to feel different from your usual work interactions. I'd recommend you schedule these in your diary. Put them in your calendar first, treat them as non-negotiable. Start small, 1 coaching session, one honest conversation with a colleague, joining one professional community, and give it time to work. So finding your people isn't about networking or collecting contacts. It's about creating genuine connections with people who understand your journey and can witness your experience without trying to fix you. So I invite you to take this action step this week. Identify one gap in your current support system and take one small step to address it. Remember, the strongest professionals are those who recognize they can't do it alone. Next week, I'll be exploring the hobby that reminded me of who I am. So talking about rediscovering personal interests. Until then, take care of yourself and remember, you don't have to recover from burnout alone. Ready to take the next step in your burnout recovery journey? Visit drjobraid.com for free resources, all 150 plus podcast episodes, and information about my keynote speaking. Links are in the show notes. Your well-being matters. Protect the asset that is you. Be your best you. Rely on MEGA for your protection and support, serving doctors for over 125 years through insurance, education, medical legal advice, and member benefits designed to help you thrive and succeed. Insurance issued by Medical Insurance Australia, which has not taken into account your objectives or situation. Before you make any decisions about our policies, please read our PDS and consider your needs. Call us for a copy or visit mega.com.au.